you're watching this, you're trying to find a simple way to swap out a heater core in a 99 GMC Sierra. Well, I'm going to tell you, there ain't no easy way. There's just one way, taking everything apart. So go ahead and give you just a brief tour, because I've already taken everything apart. I'm about ready to put the other one back in. I don't know if I needed to take off all the bolts that I did, but there's 10 or 11 bolts that were back there on the firewall. Go from right here where your condenser is all the way back over to behind the motor. There aren't but 3 of them that are actually behind the motor. So you'll have to get in there and get those out. Wasn't too bad, but when it's a truck like this one, it's actually lifted a little bit. See, I'm 6'2", and I had to use a step stool to get all the way in there. So when you get down to it, you are going to have to remove all the interior parts. Alright, there's your handrail, and there's your interior panels right there that connect to your dash, as well as your A-post. And that's one of the support rails that actually attach on top of the dash. Once you get inside, it's pretty much the same thing as outside. You're disconnecting a bunch of bolts. So there's a center support right here. Runs all the way over to the steering column. You have to disconnect it right here. You can see there's 3 bolts right there that hold all that together. There's also one in the center. You can't see it because I've got everything torn apart, but there's one in the center. You can't miss it. It's the same as these bolts right here. Your dash light right here just disconnects from your dash. The top panel, it just twists and comes loose. And then up here you actually have little brackets that slide in place. You're going to release those to get the rest of that dash panel out. This top dash panel that you saw laying over on the ground, all you do is once you get your hands on it, you just pull back on it firmly and it comes loose. Be gentle, especially with these older trucks, because you don't want the panels to break. Also, what I learned is the dash right here is completely separate from the box that actually holds the heater core. Once you get that all pulled back, you'll see that's where your heater core goes. A little difficult seeing down in there, but that's where it goes. And of course there's that. It goes right through those holes right there. And if you saw the dash earlier, you'll notice everything's out of the dash. Don't try to take any shortcuts. You can see I've got some plastic bags down there. I've got a bunch of panel screws in there, as well as I've got bolts in there. That's one of those magnetic trays. It just makes everything easy. You don't lose anything. Make sure you disconnect those wires there. They go right into that panel. Also, don't forget to disconnect your positive battery cable. Last thing you want is something getting fried because you're in there pulling around on stuff. Again, here's the panels from the driver's side. Kick panel, A-post, stereo, climate control, speedometer. Alright, so that's all those panels there. Again, make sure you start disconnecting stuff. Last thing you want is something popping loose or frying. There's bolts actually in the panel right there that you have to take loose as well. I say you do. I did. Your bolts that actually hold that center beam are going to connect to this. This actually straddles the steering column, one on each side. You see this one here? It's already loose. I didn't need to, but I didn't know. The other one goes right there. It just straddles it and bolts everything up. And of course that square piece you see in the middle, that's actually going to be that piece in there. Well, this took me a few hours to do it, but I was taking my time because I didn't know what I was doing. You're going to want to be somewhat mechanically inclined if you do something like this. If you're not mechanically inclined, I wouldn't suggest doing it on your own. I'd find one of your mechanically inclined friends, buy them a case of beer, and sit there and hand them tools. Because there's a lot that you can lose. And obviously once you get to this point, you can drop a whole lot of stuff down in there, and that's the last thing you want to do. You'll also find a bunch of pins in there from the previous owner. So, short and simple. There is no simple way. When I was going through YouTube trying to find some videos to do it, There wasn't but a couple, especially for this specific vehicle, and none of them were really helpful. They were to an extent, as they showed you where bolts were and counted out bolts and sizes. I'm going to tell you now, you're going to use a 9mm, you're going to use a 13mm, you're going to use all those to get in there. But you guys, if you're at this point, you already know how to select out your tools. You don't need a hand step guide on which tool to actually use. Okay? One thing to keep in mind, when you go put it all back together, make sure you line everything up that's got to come back through that firewall. You can see those holes. Those holes actually have guide pegs that come through, and they have to line up. So get your guide pegs in, get 1 or 2 bolts started to hold everything in place, and then go ahead and put the rest of your bolts in when you put it all back together. These are old. The old and the new heater core, the one on the left is the old one. And I assume from all this buildup right along in here that's where it was leaking. It's my guess, I don't really know. But the bottom of it down here on this little piece did have a little oil to it, or a greasy feeling. So I could definitely say that it was leaking at some point. And all I did, the new one got offline. It's fairly inexpensive, going through eBay. And it came with the foam piece that wraps around it. And all I did was swap out the old foam piece here from the other one. These tubes do spin around. They're designed that way so you can put it in the right position. I would assume only because they make this, or this particular heater core goes in different model vehicles. So that's it in a nutshell. There's no sense in you watching 15-20 minutes worth of video waiting for some real quick simple way of changing out this heater core on this truck. There is no simple way of doing it. Just disconnect your bolts, pay attention to everything. If you have to force it a little bit, but don't force it too much, because obviously you don't want to break or bend anything, otherwise it's not going to line back up. So again, short and simple, 7-8 minutes of your time. There you go. Quit searching for a real quick way to doing it. There isn't one. Just get your hands dirty and get in there.